I'll save my question to the end. It's just about equipment.
Sure. Okay. Rob?
Yeah, I'm learning heaps. I'm just trying to get my mind around all these attachments.
Right, okay.
Yeah, just feel free to ask questions at any time. It's this is not that formal, I hope.
Yeah. Don?
Yeah, I'm good. I've had a telescope for about a year, and I've learned 2 or 3 things I could and should have done by now. That's all been. I've been just playing in the back garden, sort of thing. So really helpful. Thanks very much.
That's all right.
And my silence is just just listening in, and my telescope's right next to me, so I keep checking to see what I'd done wrong last time that I was using it. But, by the way, I took the photo of the moon from my back garden that's in the background.
Yeah.
If you want to ask more technical questions, ask them. Be free.
Yeah, if I only knew how to ask a technical question, I'd really love to impress you, but I'm not.
I'm pretty impressed with that photo, Don. Good work.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at that photo thinking that's fabulous.
Yeah. It was pure hit and miss on my part. Anyway,
that's a big hit in my book.
Yeah, I agree. Good work.
Bring your telescope around. I've got a hammer for it.
What does that mean?
You can't outdo me.
Oh,
Don't lend. Whatever you do, don't lend the club telescope to Stephen.
No. Okay. All right. We might kick on then. So that's the go-to. Done the basic in the field. So now we're going to go to. Sorry, that's a push to. We're now going to go to. So Phil, do you want to take that away? I'll just highlight your spotlight you. Let's spot. Who can everyone see now? Oh, there we go. Right.
So, typical tripod. David, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Right. I'll just speak up. So, one of the things that I say to people is keep the tripod as low to the ground as you possibly can, for the same reason David was saying about wind, knocking the telescope, moving it around. Even for visual observing, you want to sit in a comfortable chair at the right height, and you'll find the height of the tripod after you've had a few observing sessions, and it'll come down to what type of telescope it is, where your eyepiece ends up being located. I keep my tripod as low as I possibly can because I've got an adjustable chair and it does go down very low, and I find it quite convenient. So set up the tripod, adjust your legs to the height that you think it should be. Then take one telescope. So this is a Meade LX200 8-inch. The piece I'm holding at the moment weighs 26 kilos. So it locates on the top of there. There's a bolt up through the bottom. I'll just screw it up a little bit so it doesn't fall off, being $6,000 worth of telescope. So we'll get it into position ready for an alignment. This one, you face it north. You set the tube horizontal. Now there's 2 caps. You can just see the rear cap. Take the rear cap off. Now the LX200 does have adjustable mirror focusing. So there's a knob here to lock the mirror, and this one moves the mirror. But all of these telescopes suffer with what's called mirror flop. You're focusing one way and you've gone a little bit too far, and you try to turn it back a very small amount in the opposite direction, and the mirror jumps. So you can't accurately focus it. Even for visual observing, focusing is quite important. Now, this is what's called a Crayford style focuser. And these are just fantastic. Don't worry about the stuff on the side. That's my electric drive. But that screws onto the back of the telescope. I'm out of practice.
That's
Haven't
what
had
COVID does to you.
Haven't had this thing out for, I don't know, months. And I'm sick of it.
Aren't we all?
To make observing easier, you can put an eyepiece in the back there, but when you're pointed up at the sky, you've got to get your head down underneath here to look at it. This is what's called a diagonal. It has a mirror in the bottom.
Phil, your telescope swinging.
Ah, that's all right. So the diagonal goes in the back of the focuser. You adjust the position. Then we take an eyepiece. Now Dave was talking about eyepieces. This is a 42 millimeter, and this is the longest focal length eyepiece that I can use on this telescope. I do have a 50, but the problem with the 50 is when you're looking through it, there's a great big black hole in the middle, and it's actually the secondary mirror that's at the front of the telescope. Is the light just doesn't bend around it properly. So there is a minimum magnitude or magnification that you can go to on any telescope, and with this one I can get down. That 42 gives me about 50 times magnification, and that's just great for looking at galaxies, nebulas, things like that. So eyepiece goes in there. Then we've got things like the right angle finder scope screws on.
Phil, just want to put your camera up a little bit. Thanks.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, so that goes on like that. And David was talking about lining. There's two screws on the top here and a spring in the bottom. You look through the main telescope and look at a power pole or a tree in the distance. The further away, the better. And then you adjust these two screws. So what you see through the finder scope is the same object. If you do it on something that's really close, when you get to the sky, you'll find there's quite a bit of an error. So you want something several kilometers away. Now this telescope, I have built a level into here. It's one of the round levels that it doesn't just go in one direction; it goes in all directions. It's not quite level, but I would just tip it a little bit to adjust the length of the legs to set it up. Beyond that, I've got. So we need a battery. You want a battery big enough to run your telescope for several hours. Power lead. Chuck power lead in. Now, David was talking about dew heaters. I put this one on every time. Now, this cost about $5 to build. So all it is I'm sure you can see the bumps.
Yep.
See the bumps in there. So they're resistors from J-Car. There's two pieces of wire down the side, and the resistors are all just soldered across it. And you've got the wires coming out, which go into a controller. And you can actually get a dew heater going for very little money. The very expensive ones can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So
I should have come and visited you, Phil.
Could have done, yeah. Now, my job is in electronics. I design electronics. So my telescope has another computer built into the side here.
Yep.
Probably only see the backlight there. But the heater band itself has a temperature sensor built into it, away from the resistors. And that computer measures the temperature of the front of the telescope. On the side here, these are all add-ons. So in there is a temperature sensor and a humidity sensor. So the computer, by measuring ambient temperature and humidity, can work out what the dew point is. So it then measures the temperature of the front of the telescope and only turns the heater on to keep the front of the telescope a couple of degrees above dew point. So I just put it on. Every night I set it up, I put it on. And if it's not needed because the humidity is very low, then the heater doesn't turn on, doesn't drain the battery. But if the dew point, if the humidity increases and you need a bit of heat, it'll just automatically turn the heater on. The only time it's let me down has been up at Coonabarra Brand. It was below zero and there was fog rolling down the hill. So, you know, it was looking like 100% humidity. And what I had to do is I had to get into the computer, through the menu and crank up the heater a bit. But yeah, when it's below zero and 100% humidity, it's hard to keep things under control. But we did. So the last thing we need is hand controller. Plugs in.
I like the comment.
Yep, we can see it. Yep, good.
I went through. It's just going through like a
Start up.
self-test at the moment, loading up the database. I'll just wait there for a moment. It'll come up with its alignment menu. I'm just gonna.
So is that network connected or is that independent?
No, it's completely independent.
Okay, thank you.
So it doesn't wind up the cables that go down through the shaft. It has a stop. It'll go around about not quite 2 times, and you've got to get it halfway between the stops. So
That's it. We can see it.
So press enter to align or mode for menu. So press 0. The screen's gone very dull now because it thinks you're outside. So
And then it walks off on you.
you can see it's whirring backwards and forwards. What it's doing is it's finding its home position. So it's looking for magnetic north. I'm not sure if you can see that. It just tipped
Yes.
the tube down.
So is that leveling the tube itself in that scenario?
Yes, it's tipped the tube up and it's winding it down. And there's a level sensor in the side. And when it sees level, it says, right, there's the tube's level there. It does that 3 or 4 times. It's facing north. It's done a little wobble backs and forwards to find magnetic north. And after it's done the level here, 3 or 4 times, it'll swing round and do it facing east, and then it'll swing round further and do it facing south, and that's compensating for any any unlevel, is that the right word? Yeah, unlevelness of the actual tripod. I always try and set it up as level as I possibly can.
Phil, someone's made a comment about your lasers. Do you want to? Have you got your lasers turned on?
My laser, I can put it on.
I think they put it on as a joke, but they didn't realize you have lasers too.
Yeah, I thought it was a joke.
I know, it's serious.
That's a no-no as far as astrophotography goes.
Yeah,
So out of curiosity, what does the laser do? Does it allow you to focus better maybe by seeing the differences in the dot high in the atmosphere or something?
with all of this searching for objects, I can just stand behind the telescope, flick the laser on, and say I want to go. You know, if we're heading up to a star up there, you know, I just look at the star and swing around and bring the laser up onto that star. No red spot finders, no no spotting scopes.
Oh, wow.
That Igor hates my laser. We use them as infrequently as we possibly can. But look, I do a lot of outreach programs through the club, and we go, say, down to the botanical gardens and do an astronomy night down there. And when the people come out to look through the telescope, they say, where are we looking in the sky? You know, what can I see? I just flick the laser on and say, right, that's what we're looking at just there. And I say, the object we're looking at is not naked eye visible, meaning you can't see it. If I turn the laser off, there's nothing there where we're actually looking. And a good example of that is the jewel box near the Southern Cross. We show the people the jewel box. It's a beautiful little star cluster, but it's not naked eye visible. You can see it in binoculars. It's quite small, but you know, with a telescope and reasonable magnification, you know, like 100, 120 times magnification, it's just a beautiful view. People are just interested in where they're looking, and by putting the laser on, they can see where the telescope's actually pointing. Now, what we're doing at the moment is we're taking a GPS fix. Now, last month, this took 15 or 20 minutes to get a fix inside this room. I'm at the middle level of a 3-story house with a tin roof, and we're facing south at the moment. So I was actually surprised that it actually got a GPS fix. So it'll sit here for quite a while. If it does get a fix, it'll pick an alignment star and it'll zoom around and point at that star, and the hand controller will say center the brightest star. Once that you've centered it, press enter. It'll go to a second alignment star. You center that, and from then on, it just knows where everything is. Now, with this telescope, if you use something like a Bluetooth device plugged into the control panel, you can control it from your phone via the Sky Safari app. I can actually connect my telescope to my laptop, which I load a program in that I've made a list of objects that I want to look at. So from the laptop, I just pointed an object on the screen and say pan, and the telescope just goes there. So I can do visual observing of 50 or 80 objects in a 3 or 4 hour period. Whereas if you do star hopping, I used to be able to find about 3 objects in 4 hours. So yeah, this is all about the observing, not finding the objects. Okay, David, look, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you.
I'd love to show you guys how this all works for real out in the field in the not too distant future. When we have the beginners nights, you bring your telescope, I bring this and set it up to show you what a, I don't know, like an upper end price-wise telescope can do in the visual field. Okay, back to you there, David.
Thanks, Phil. So we'll probably just cap on. So as Phil mentioned, this is quite a very capable go-to scope. Obviously, you saw it self-leveling. It also does self-GPS, and he also talked about it finds its own alignment stars. So even if you buy a cheaper end go-to scope, some of those things are just not automated. You need to do them yourself. But the same basic process happens, which is it needs a GPS location, so you need to type that in. It needs to know the date and the time, so you need to type that in. You do it all through the handset. And then probably the most difficult piece is it then says, how do you want to do the alignment? You can do a 3-star alignment. So you tell it where 3 stars in the sky are, or 2 stars, and you can do a 1-star alignment. Obviously, the more stars you do, then the more accurate the mathematical model it has, an understanding of where everything is in the sky. So if you took a 3-star alignment, it would typically come up, and they all do it basically the same. So whether it's Mead or a Celestron or a Skywatcher, the program is basically the same. It says center it on a star. Some of them will tell you which star to pick. Other ones will just say pick any of the stars, and you can pick anything. And you say, right, I'll pick this one. Let's call it Sirius. We just used that one before. It says, right, it'll then swing the telescope around to where it thinks Sirius is. And you then adjust it and say, well, it's actually not there, it's here. And then you press a button on the handset, and then it'll say, okay, now center it in the eyepiece. And that's where, this reticle eyepiece we talked about before with the crosses on it. And so you center it using the eyepiece, so it's as most accurate as you can. And then you press the button again. It then says, okay, let's go to the 2nd star. And so let's say that's Alpha Centauri. And the reason why it picks at different parts of the sky. And so you pick Alpha Centauri, same process. It swings around to where it thinks it is. And you adjust it using the handset, so it's not there, and you bring it through and say, no, when I look through the finder scope or the TELRAD, okay, it's there. And then it says, okay, now I'd fine adjust it through the eyepiece, through the reticle piece. You press the button again, so yes, it's there, and then you do it for the 3rd star. And then what it does, if you've been accurate enough, it'll then do its maths and says, yes, I now know where it will come and say alignment success. If it comes up and says alignment failure, it's because you weren't accurate in something. Okay, it'll either be your GPS location. You might have put north instead of south, either side of the equator. You might put daylight savings time incorrectly. It'll be something like that, or you weren't fine enough with the star in the center of the eyepiece. But it'll be, if it says alignment failure, it's basically you haven't been accurate enough. If you've been accurate enough, it'll find out where it is meant to be. So it does the maths, does the model, and then it says success, and then you use the handpiece to say, I want to see this, I want to see this, and it swings it around. So, but all the models, the main models, so as I said, Skywatcher, Celestron, or Mead, and most of the others, to be honest, as well, use a very similar process.
So one of the challenges I've got a Skywatcher, and most of the time I'm doing it from home. So I've only got limited areas of sky that I can see. And it gives you a list of stars, some of which I can't see, some of which I'm not 100% sure where they are in the first instance. Actually, that's not too much of a problem, other than I don't know whether I can see it or not, because obviously it moves to it itself. But yeah, I have a problem where the stars that it gives me the option of are fairly limited. So I find I have to do a 1 or 2 star alignment, and then it doesn't track later on so well. Or yeah, I then have to kind of
2-star alignment is more than enough. You don't really need to do 3-star alignment.
Okay.
Okay, and
So,
what I'm doing is
what would be my problem? Because what I've found is I do 2 stars, and you can use planets as well, according to this app, the Sync Scan or whatever.
Yes, you can.
And so I use Jupiter and maybe Antares or something to the north, because that tends to be where I'm facing. And then often I find that if I'm using a high magnification, it's not there. So then I'll change the eyepiece to something wider. Oh, it's off to the right, center it. And I find that it's a little bit.
I'll cover that now because
Okay.
I've got a Skywatcher here, so I'll take you through the full setup, and then you can ask me questions if we don't cover it, and I'll try and explain them to you.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, so the key thing is it comes down to being as accurate as you can at each of those steps.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Igor will go through that. So the only other way, so that's what you do if you're using the handset. Obviously, when you go up to the next grade, which is when you start to do astrophotography, you typically have your laptop there, and there's different techniques you use. But for starting out, just using the handset's a great way to start out because you'll learn and you'll understand the skies. One of the most often, but when you actually go look at that, you actually won't get Sirius. You'll get a star near it. Now, Sirius is very bright, so you actually may not get that one right. It may not get that one wrong. But that's why you want to really pick a bright star that's probably away from everything else. If you're actually going into where there's like a few stars, it can be confusing because you're looking through your eyepiece and you'll pick the wrong star. So try and always pick a star that's really obvious, like Sirius, Canopus, Alpha Centauri, one of the pointers or whatever.
And use software like Sky Safari. That'll help you identify the star that you've been asked to point the telescope to. So you won't have any issues there as far as knowing where you're pointing to. If you don't have Sky Safari, there's some cheaper software you can get. Yeah.
Generally speaking, if when I've made mistakes in the past, it says pick Sirius, and I haven't picked the right star through the eyepiece. That's where I make mistakes.
Identifying the stars is one of the big problems. If you stick to stars that have special characteristics, like David's saying Alpha Centauri, if you use Rigel Centaurus, that is actually a double star, and most simple telescopes will split the two stars.
Yeah.
So, you look through the telescope and you say, okay, I'm only seeing one star, so I'm on the wrong one.
To split Alpha Centauri, you'll need at least an 8-inch telescope. So if you're using anything smaller, you'll have issues.
Yeah.
However, Acrux is also a double star, and the separation between them is much greater. So I think, in my opinion, Acrux is a lot better.
Yeah, but then you've got things like Antares, which looks like Mars by color.
Yeah.
So if you get used to, if you're just using some obscure white star, then one looks like any other.
Yeah.
But go for the ones that have characteristics like double stars, color. Betelgeuse is good. Okay, back to you, David.
All right, thanks. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to flip over to the equatorial mount. So this is probably the most technically demanding when you get to astrophotography because you need to be very accurate. So I'll just pass it over now to Igor, and I'm going to swap between different screens. So if it changes a little bit, just to try and highlight as you can see it. So Igor.
We haven't done anything. Okay, David's back on. We've had some Hunter Valley star parties, just a bit closer to home, just a 2-hour drive. At Coonabarabran is just so dark. Anyway, David, you back?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that.
That's
So,
all right.
all right, let's. Igor, are you right to start?
Yes, I think I am.
Okay.
Can everyone see this?
I'm just going to try and make you bigger, Igor. So just hold on. What does everyone see at the moment?
We're back to you. We were on Igor when he was talking. I think that's just changed over.
Okay, right. So I'll just try and spotlight him.
That's it.
Okay.
Tonight I'll be talking about a German equatorial mount, a GEM. And equatorial mounts in comparison to the mounts you've seen earlier are more suitable for astrophotography. And the reason for this being that when an equatorial mount tracks an object, it tracks it in a circle. So just imagine if you think of an ALTAS mount tracking an object, it has to move to the left, then it's got to move up, move left, move up, move down, move left, and so on. So what happens, you start getting what's known as frame rotation, which is not good for astrophotography. In short exposures, it can be eliminated, but if you have exposures greater than 15-20 minutes, then you'll have significant amount of frame rotation and you're going to start losing your image. And that's why you can compensate for this by using a frame derotator, and these are very expensive and usually used in large observatories that are ALTAS mounted. Now, for amateur astronomy, equatorial mounts are much better for astrophotography. And the mount that I have here is an EQ6R from Skywatcher. This particular model has a peer extension. So if you could imagine this, when you buy this particular mount, it will come without this peer extension here, right? But since I have mounted it, I thought I'd just leave it on, and it's not a big problem. And I do recommend that if you're going to buy this type of mount, if you're going to buy an EQ6 of any kind, then I do recommend you buy a sort of a peer, because they'll give you an extra height, which is also, it's good for visual observing as well as astrophotography, because it's going to keep your telescope away from these legs and will stop them from hitting them. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to talk about how you should set up the telescope for polar alignment. And the first thing you need to do is you have to identify where, so in Australia, in Sydney, we live in the southern hemisphere, so we need to find the south celestial pole. And they, unfortunately for us, people in the northern hemisphere have Polaris. We don't have any star that we can visually identify. I have been trying to find Sigma Octantis, but it's almost impossible to see it in Sydney. You can see it through binoculars, but not with naked eye. So finding a pole in southern hemisphere is a bit of a challenge, but can be achieved quite easily. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, we have to use a compass, either a compass or you can use your phone. So I got a compass here, right? So this one here was about $140. It's relatively good quality, and I haven't had any problems using this and finding the pole within. You need to be within about 5 degrees off the pole in order to polar align. Okay. A lot of people have gadgets that they can, people create circles that plug into the hole, they screw them in, and then they have extension, some sort of non-magnetic material, and they stand out here with mounted compasses, and that allows them to find the pole. But the simplest way of doing it is you can measure the distance between the legs down the bottom, find the midpoint, and then either draw a line or just use some sort of straight edge. So that from the front, just imagine this is pointing towards south. So what you want that line pointing towards south, and you use your compass then to adjust your mount so that it's pointing to south. So if you have a look here, you can see. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
So you can see here in Sydney, apparently we are about 12.5 degrees off. The magnetic pole is 12.5 degrees due east of the geographic pole. Okay. So what you need to do is you need to compensate for that, and that's what I've done here. I am compensating for the discrepancy. So here's the magnetic north, right? But my true north is pointing this way. Magnetic point is north is pointing that way, and true north is pointing this way. What you need is the true north. So you need to be pointing your compass at true north, okay? And your telescope needs to be pointing at the meridian that cuts from true north to south, right? So we need to then position a tripod so that it's facing towards south. So in a lot of these tripods, they have a positioning post, right, which you can't see here because it's hidden underneath the mount. I'll show you later. And that positioning post should always be facing due south, because that post is used for the azimuth alignment. Okay, do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. You're getting nods.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we need to be within 5 degrees of the south. Okay. And then what we need to do is, once we are pointing towards the south, what we need to do is we have to make our mount as level as possible, right? And I use these things. Something I got from JCar. It's a little level. And I bought this one, I think, from Bunnings. Okay, can you see that? And I also have this one here. And this one makes things a lot simpler. But when you buy it from Bunnings, it's not calibrated. It's actually all over the place. So
sorry, what is that? I see just white.
It's a level.
Oh, okay, a level. Yeah, okay.
It's a round level.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. And this one is a flat one.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yeah. The bubble level, the spirit level, yep.
There's another bubble level there.
Yep.
Okay. So I got this bit of metal here, something flat. Okay, you put that down here. And what you want to do is you want to level your mount. So the best way to do it is to do your 3 legs. And I do them in clockwise direction. So if I start with this leg here, okay, so I start with this leg here, I would adjust it until the bubble is in the middle. Then I would move to this leg here, and I would adjust it until the bubble is in the middle, and then I'd move on to that other leg. Okay, and by then I should be pretty level. The reason why I use 2 is so that I can see what's happening basically in both
Axis.
in both directions. Okay, this is where this round level is a lot better, because it tells me straight away whether I'm in the center or not. So I use the little round bubble level more than the other 2. Okay, any questions there? So once you've leveled your mount, and I don't have to go through the process, do I?
No.
Once you level your mount, and it's not all that important to be 100% level, because most of the telescope software these days will account for the cone error and calculate it out. Okay, now that we got the tripod level and pointing to the south, the next thing we do is we will place a mount on top of the telescope, on top of the tripod. Okay. Now, can you have a look at this here? This is some sort of primitive inclinometer, right? And it's telling me basically what angle this mount is pointing to, right? Living at the latitudes where we are, Sydney is about 34 degrees south of the equator, which means the refracted pole, the celestial pole, is going to be around 34 degrees. So this here has to be at 34 degrees, right? Okay. And this is where south is in this direction. I will point the telescope mount to the south, and I'll just apply these bolts because that's how it's mounted. Now, deliberately moved this angle here away from 34 degrees so I can show you how to basically get it to where it's supposed to be. Let me just secure the mount on the tripod first. Okay. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to set up that angle that I was talking to you about so that we're roughly pointing towards the pole, right? And at the moment, this angle is about 45, 50 degrees. Okay. Now the way that I do this is I don't trust that that inclinometer that comes with a telescope. It's very inaccurate. What I do use is this inclinometer here. As you can see, it's far more accurate. It's got a bigger dial, and it gets me to within about a degree of where I'm supposed to be, of 34 degrees. Now, what I've done is I've made up a little jig, because this is magnetic. It sits there, right? So what I do is I place this into the mount like a telescope, right? And I have a little tab here, which is actually adjusted for 34 degrees, right? So that sits there like that. Okay. And mind you, this is just a rough alignment. You can see, can everyone see this the white line?
Yeah.
Can you see that it's not aligned with the little tab?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see the angle is much greater than 34 degrees. So what I'll do is I will bring the mount down by turning these knobs, or this particular knob here. Until, can you see it coming down?
Very slow, but I think we get the point.
You get the point?
There we go.
There you go. That's about, yeah, that's close enough. So that's now at 34 degrees, right? I can take this off. The next thing we have to do is we have to position the mount, and we do take out the counterweight bar. Position the mount into its home position, right? The home position means that the mount needs to be pointing due south, and it has to be at right angles to the Earth. Okay. So the way to do that is we got these setting circles, right? We got two setting circles, one for declination and the other for right ascension. Now, I have just get the level, this level here. Okay. What I do is I put the level here on the bar, and I level it out until it's perfectly level, right? And then I tighten the azimuth. And once I've done this, I can now loosen these setting circles, knobs, and zero this out. Right? There's a little notch here, which is telling me that, you know, I point the zero to that notch. That leaves me here at 6 or 18 hours, right? Which is 90 degrees to the zero here. So now what I do is I can now loosen this and move it down until it's zeroed out, right? Now my mount is actually now pointing straight to the ground, and it's at 34 degrees. The other thing I have to do is I have to zero out the declination axis. And the way I do that is I use the same level. I put the level there and I rotate it until it's perfectly level. There. And I tighten it. And now I set these axes. These are already set, so I zeroed these out as well. Okay. And now I can rotate this to 90 degrees here. And I do have a little mark that I've placed, and you should do that yourself as well, so that I can always find this 90-degree spot. So that's now these two axes are aligned with each other. And they're both pointing to 34 degrees. So my mount is now set up. The next thing I do is I put counterweights on. So be very careful not to put your telescope onto your mount without counterweights, because you will have an unpleasant surprise when your telescope hits the ground. So here's the counterweight. I'm not sure if one is going to be enough, but I'll try one first. Now this is moved. I'll have to readjust that angle again. I've gone too far, obviously. And you don't notice it until you actually have the counterweights there. But I don't have to worry because I have marked all of my positions and everything should be fine. I'll just have to adjust the altitude again. How's that? Perfect. Okay, now the counterweight is on, and let me just make sure that nothing's moved. This has, and I can zero this out now. Okay, now we're back where we started. Okay, now the next step is to put the telescope on the mount. I got a little sharp star here. This is 100 millimeters. And what we need to do is we need to balance the telescope. But before we do this, we have to obviously build the telescope up. And in my case, I got these mounting rings for the camera, the proper astrophotography camera. But what I'll do is I'll just place the prism and an eyepiece in here, because we'll do some setting up. Okay, here's the diagonal that I use, very similar to the one film uses. In my case, it just screws on. I do have this, this telescope is capable of having a rotator. So I can just rotate that. Okay. Lock everything in. This is the focuser here. And what I do is I try to use the widest field eyepiece as possible. And I think I have a 40mm field as 28. Anyway, this is a 32mm, so I'll just use a 32mm. But try to have as wide as a field as possible eyepiece for your initial setup. Okay, so the eyepiece goes in there, and I do have a finder scope. I rarely ever use it as a finder scope. Very similar to the one that you saw earlier. I do prefer to use the red dot finder, and that's the red dot finder that I have. Very similar to the others, but slightly different. And that goes into a slot. Yeah. Now you have to align your red dot finder, and you do it in exactly the same way as you saw earlier when David was explaining to you. Now, before I go any further, this thing here is very important. It's a safety that has to be put in place, otherwise you'll end up wearing the counterweight on your foot. Okay, now once the telescope has been assembled, what we can do now is balance it. So just loosen this, and you can see that it's telescope heavy. So I have to move this counterweight back a little bit more. And there it is. Okay. Now, once we've balanced the array axis, we have to balance the declination axis as well. Now, you should remove the cap before you balance the declination axis. As you can see, it's back end heavy, right? So it's got to go, the telescope has to go forward. Oops. And it's still back end heavy. So what I'll have to do now is I'll have to loosen the cradle and move the telescope up, because I'm running out of adjustment here. So that's what I'm doing now. Just make sure that this is nice and tight and that is nice and tight so that nothing moves. So now move the telescope forward in the cradle. Just make sure that you tighten everything up securely so you don't end up losing a telescope on the ground. Okay, now I can drop this down a bit more. I hope. Yeah. Well, let's see how it balances now. So it's forward, it's front heavy now. So let's drop it down a bit more. And when you do it to your own telescope, you would want to mark a position. I don't mark anything because I got 4 telescopes. So, you know, it would be, my mount would be full of marks. But there you go. That's pretty well balanced now all around. Okay, now that I've balanced my telescope, remember we marked this before, and we can now position the telescope back to where it originally was. Simply zero it out. Okay, and it's ready to be connected now. I'll just connect the power to it. The battery here, it's about 50 amp hours. So my mount draws about half an amp, so it's good for about 100 hours. But when it comes to astrophotography, the camera draws quite a bit of power. Unless, well, if you're using an SLR, then SLR uses its own battery, so you're quite safe. But if you're using a cooled camera, cool cameras can draw quite a bit of power. They usually draw about 2 to 3 amps when they're cooling. Okay, now I have to connect the hand controller. It's a SysCam hand controller that comes with this particular EQ6R. So the hand controller is connected. And I can turn the power on.
Igor, just want to put the handset around the front just so people can see it.
Okay, so I'll be holding the handset. So let me just turn the power on. Okay, you guys, here's the handset. Can everyone see that? It's initializing. So operating mode, this particular controller supports both Alt-Az and equatorial mode. So I'm just going to switch it. I was fooling around with AZ mode, but it doesn't seem to be working all that well. And I'll switch it to EQ mode. Can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Presenter. It's telling me firmware version. Never pointed at the sun. And basically here we enter the latitude and longitude. In this case, longitude, which is 151, 18 degrees where I am. I enter to that. And then we enter latitude, which is 33 degrees and 39 minutes here. I won't change that. I'll just enter. The time zone is 10 hours. I enter on that. And my altitude here is 40 meters above sea level. Enter that. And of course, the date is wrong, which should be 09. And we are 22, 21. There you go. Press enter. The time is 9:42. So 21, 42. The time has to be fairly accurate if you're doing astrophotography. So it should be within at least half a minute or so. Okay, I've entered the time. Daylight saving is no. And well, it talks about Polaris. We're nowhere near it. Just enter on that. Enter again. And now it wants to do a star line. Okay. So we begin a star line. Now, if I'm just going to do visual observing, I'll do a 1-star alignment and that's it. Okay, you don't need to do 2-star alignment. If you're going to do astrophotography, you need to do 2-star alignment. So to begin the alignment, I'll just press 1 to acknowledge that. And here it starts with 1-star alignment. Can everyone see that?
Bit closer.
How's that?
That's better. Yeah, you can see that. Yep.
Okay, 1-star alignment. And then I will choose a 2-star alignment. So I'll just push the down arrow, this arrow here. And I'll have 2-star alignment, right?
Good.
Okay. Press enter on that. And it's choosing a 1st star, which is Arcana. Okay, Arcana is in the southern hemisphere. It's towards very close to the celestial pole. It's rising in the east at the moment. Okay, so I will choose that star now. Enter, and the mount is going to move to where it thinks Arcana is, and that's where east is apparently here. Okay, so the next thing to do is I'd be looking through my eyepiece now, right? Mind you that I'll be using the widest field of view eyepiece as I have, and I would be now using these keys here. You can see these to move my mount around, right, until I center Arcana as best as I can in this eyepiece, okay? And once it's centered, I can also use, there are various rate controls that I can do. There's a rate control here, this button, which allows me to select a rate of 1 through to 9, and 9 being the fastest. So what I do is I use a rate of 6 or 7 for rough adjustment, and then as I get close, I switch it to 3 or 4, rate 3 or 4, and then I continue on until I center the object, okay? Now, once I've centered the object, I will press enter. And the next star it has selected is Acrux, right? Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, Acrux is at the moment in the south. So the telescope is going to move to the right. And I will enter on that. So that's where crux is at the moment, approximately. So what I'll do the same thing again for the A crux. You know, I will again try to position A crux as best as I can in the center of the eyepiece. And once I've done that, I will press enter. Now, in order to be more accurate, if you want to be a lot more accurate, what you can do is once you've centered the star in a, say, really wide angle eyepiece, you can switch eyepieces and then select something that's, you know, in this case, it's a 32 millimeter. I can choose a 25 millimeter, or I can go for a reticular eyepiece, which is this one here. Okay. And having it centered with the previous eyepiece, I should be able to find it with this eyepiece somewhere around the fringes. And this is a 12.5 millimeter with reticules. So it's backlit. I think you've seen the backlighting on this. Can you see that there's a red? And I'll replace this eyepiece with this eyepiece. And then recenter the star and make sure that the star is right in the square, right? These reticules are parallel there, and they're crossing each other. And where they cross, they create a little square. What you want is the star right in the center of that square, right? So I would do this right from first go. I didn't cover it earlier, but because in a lot of cases you don't need to be that accurate. Okay, but if you want to be really accurate, this is how you do it. So once I'm happy with this, and you know, I've positioned A crux right in the center, I will press enter again, and this will then acknowledge that alignment was successful. Well, it just disappeared. But you know, I'll press enter again, and it's telling me, you know, whatever it thinks the error from the pole is. I mean, it's obviously inaccurate because we haven't done any adjustments. And okay, so once you've done a 2-star alignment, what I do then is a polar alignment. Okay, and I think someone mentioned earlier, I live in a unit or whatever. I can't see south. I don't even know where Sigma Octantis is. You don't have to know where Sigma Octantis is. You don't have to know where celestial pole is. There's a routine that comes with SynScan, and it allows you to polar align the telescope using other stars. So what we'll do is we'll dial in now a polar alignment routine. Okay, and you do that with these keys, right? You use the down arrow key, and you know, you just move down through the alignment processes until you get down to polar alignment. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Are there any questions at this stage?
No.
Okay. So here we go through the polar alignment process. So I'll press enter on that. And it says, I want to polar align on Canopus. Okay. So Canopus is in the east at the moment. And it's pretty low in the east. And that's where the telescope is going to move now. Press enter. Okay, it's slewing to where it thinks Canopus is. Okay. So now the next step is to, again, switch to a wider angle eyepiece. Okay. You may even have to use your finder scope or your red dot finder if it's a bit too far off. But generally speaking, it shouldn't be, because we did a 2-star alignment earlier. The star should be within relative proximity of being seen through the wide angle eyepiece. Okay. So what we need to do now is we need to align this star so it's in the center. Okay. And that's what I'm going to be doing now. So I'll remove this eyepiece, put the other eyepiece in. And using these positioning keys and rate controls, I'll be finding and pointing, making sure that Canopus is as close as possible to the center. Okay. Now, once I've done that, I'll replace my eyepieces and I'll use a fine eyepiece with reticules, and I'll make sure that Canopus is dead smack in the middle of that. Okay. Once I'm happy with that, I'll press enter.
Sorry to interrupt, but quick question on topic.
Yes.
If presumably it's not tracking when you're aligning it through the reticle, so it moves a little bit. Do you need to sort of finagle the controls to make sure you're tracking it with up and down and so forth when you're doing this?
Well, it is tracking. It actually is tracking, and telescope at this stage is pretty well aware of its position in the sky and the tracking speed. That's why we did a 2-star alignment initially, right?
Yep, gotcha.
So now what the telescope is doing, it's slewing. Remember that error that we got earlier? It's slewing the and moving, and it just happened. I heard it, but you probably didn't. And it's offset the telescope now by the amount of that error that was calculated earlier. Remember, we had that error of pole error. And now what we need to do is we need to use the altitude adjustment knobs. Okay, so if you have a look at this, you can read. It tells you what to do. Okay, so we need to use the altitude adjustment knobs in order to get the star to move back as close as possible to the center of the eyepiece. Okay, so that's what we do now. So, you know, I look through the eyepiece and I can see that the star has moved up, right, in the eyepiece here. And what I'll do is I'll lower the altitude control knobs until I get the star as close as possible, right, to the center. Once I've gone as close as possible, I stop. Okay, I tighten everything up. And I move to the next step. Okay, the next step is going to be the azimuth control. So it's going to slew the star again out where it thought the azimuth error was, and it says now adjust the azimuth controls. Okay, so what I'll do again is use the wide angle eyepiece. And using the same controls, again, position the star as close to the center as I can. Okay, once I'm happy with that, I'll replace the eyepiece. With the reticular eyepiece. And I will center the star using the azimuth control knobs. Okay, these ones here. Sorry, I made a mistake earlier. I told you wrong information. You don't use the SynScan controls, you use azimuth controls. Okay, these knobs here. Can everyone see that? These knobs. So you move it like so, right? Can you see that? Until the star is right dead smack in the middle. And once the star is there, then you press enter on the SynScan. And that's our polar alignment. So we're now polar aligned. Okay. Now, if you want to be super accurate, and sometimes if you're doing long exposure astrophotography, you may have to repeat this again, just to be closer to the pole. If you're doing guiding, this should be close enough. If you're guiding and you have a guide camera, I think one polar alignment is fine. I haven't never had to do it twice. But sometimes if you're using say an SLR, you don't have a guider and you want between 30 and a minute snapshot, a sub, then I think you should repeat your polar alignment again and try to get as close to the pole as possible. Okay, now that we are polar aligned, of course, we can now start viewing, and we can select an object in the sky. So we can go to and select
Might be a silly question, but if you've got an auto guider, why would you need to polar align again?
you don't have to. I said you don't have to.
Sorry, I missed that. Okay, cool. So the whole point of having the auto guider is you eliminate the need to then do that again.
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool.
Well, with auto guider, you can have some polar error there.
Okay.
But there's a restriction even for that, because you start getting your guide star is going to start drifting as well, and it's not going to help.
The thing is, no matter how accurate you do your polar alignment, you'll never be zero. You're always going to be a little bit out. There's many reasons why. All mounts have errors in them. When you set it up, you may not have got exactly spot on. So what auto guiding does is help to reduce that movement around by holding that guide star right in the right spot.
So the next thing we do is we select from the menu and we choose the object list. Okay, press enter on that. And we can go and find the name star, say Haida, Hadar, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, we can go, or Alpha Centauri. But anyway, we can also go choose an object like from the IC catalog, from SEA catalog, Caldwell, you know, various other catalogs for stars, NGC catalog, or solar system if you want to observe the planets. Okay. So if you want to find out if, well, Jupiter is up there. So if I select enter, and it starts with Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter. There's Jupiter. Press enter. And I'll just first go to Jupiter. So Jupiter is in the north at the moment. So there you go. Now, if you want to do astrophotography, of course, we have to replace the prism with the camera. Sorry, not the prism, the lens with the camera. So that's what I'm going to do, because I'm going to use the SLR. Is the
Igor, maybe just can you swing your mount around a little bit? I mean, I know that just to make it easier. I don't know if you can do that.
okay. I can swing it.
You don't need to swing it. You've actually in the other image that you've got Igor.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point. Oh,
If someone, yeah, there you go.
Okay. So you can see it better there.
Oh no, sorry. I thought we could, but we can't. It's
no,
on
we
the
can't. It's
it's
missed
on-
them both.
Yeah. Good work, Igor. You couldn't have planned that better. Maybe change
What I'll
the
do
location.
is, look, we don't have to be polar aligned anymore, do we? I mean, we don't have to be star aligned anymore, do we?
No.
So I can swing it around. Is that okay?
Yeah.
It's a bit heavy for me to be lifting it. I don't want to hurt my back.
No, just use your hand controller.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just swing it around.
Oh,
Yeah,
you mean to swing it around like that? Okay.
yeah.
You thought I was going to ask you to move the 50 kilos of metal.
It's only a demo.
Probably just put it in your home position.
Point at the moon, it's closer to the horizon.
Is that better?
Yeah, we can see that now. That's good.
Okay. So here's the, this is just one of my cameras. It's an old one. It's a EOS 650D. It's unmodified. And I have an adapter for it. There's a camera adapter, which you can buy. In this case, it's got this adapter for 1¼ inch throat there, and but this particular Canon adapter is suitable for 2-inch as well. So it just sits in here. It sits like a like an objective. There you go. That's what it looks like. And that just sits in here. Okay. So now that you've replaced the eyepiece with the camera, the focal point has changed. So you have to focus the camera, right? And the way I would do that is, first let me turn it on. Okay. Now this particular camera has the ability to view through the what do you call it?
LCD.
LCD.
Live view.
Live view. And so what I would do is now I would focus the camera, and the best way to focus is to use what's known as a Batinov mask. That's what it looks like. Okay. And that sits at the front here, like that. And you adjust it so it doesn't fall off. It's got these adjusters. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to have an electronic rotator. Electronic focuser and the rotator. Okay, well that's secure now. And what you would do now is you would choose a fairly bright star. Okay, so we can select, let's say, Alpha Centauri. So I'll just go and into the menu. And I'll select name stars. Okay, name stars again. And I will find Haida. So it goes into through alphabetic order. Sorry, I did say Alpha Centauri. That's Rigel Kentaurus.
You go. We might start to wrap it up because we've been on a bit while.
Okay. Oh, let's choose Haida then. That's Beta Centauri, right? Okay. The center. Enter again. And okay, has anyone seen Batinov mask being used in the past? You get this cross.
Yep.
And a line right between them. That's when you're in focus. Okay, and that's what you do here. Okay. Should we wrap up here, or what do we do?
Let's just. Can you show? You won't be able to see the diffraction spikes, will you? In the.
Doubt it.
No, I think you had that recorded, didn't you? You had that. I just want to cover, this is a guider. Okay. It's got a little camera on it. And that sits in the place of the, so what I remove is this red dot finder. Now you're going to need, you must guide if you want to, if you need, if you're going to do anything longer than a minute, you have to guide. There's no way that you're going to achieve anything without guiding. Okay, so there's a little guider, and this cable here actually plugs into the mount. There's an auto guide port here on the other side, and I'll swing that around now. Oh, I can't swing it around.
It's all right. It's just a plug.
It's just a plug, yeah. So there you go. This telescope is now ready to take photographs. Now, let me just show you something else. Here's my other telescope, and this is fully configured now for astrophotography. That is a dedicated astrophotography camera. Okay. That is a autofocuser, and that is a dew controller. That is the dew shield. Okay. And that's the Esprit 80. This is my baby telescope. Okay, any questions?
I think, Steve, that's what you're buying, isn't it?
I've got so many questions. It's so confusing. This is like when you go to buy kit. I think I put in my chat, I actually was sort of going down 3 paths. One was just to go with a red cat for astrophotography and use my DSLR and get a basic setup, but I feel like I'm not going to be able to take very deep photos, so more wider field of view photos and then post-production. That's what I've kind of gathered. The second option was to then go down the HEQ5 ED80 route with an auto guider, and I was sort of leaning down that angle, and then Primo Lucia Lab Eagle rather than bringing a laptop. And then I went off on a completely different tangent when I spoke to one of the telescope shops today, when he was going, no, you should buy a reflector telescope instead with a HEQ5 and all the rest of the kit that I've spoken about. So I don't know, it's just, I feel like every time I look at it, and I'm a researcher, so I probably tie myself in knots. It's just trying to get a good setup that's also not going to break the bank, and I'm not going to have to sink the cost of a small car when you're starting up with something and you don't necessarily want to outlay such a significant amount of money with it. You know what I mean?
The question is how serious are you, and how deep do you want to go?
I think as someone that's starting off, I don't think it's easy to answer that question.
Yeah, but you can achieve very good astrophotography with relatively cheap equipment. And if you want to go cheap and good, I recommend you buy yourself a Newtonian reflector, and you can get them nowadays for about $1,000 f4. And if you don't want to spend money and buy a Primo Lucia Eagle, which is what I have,
yep.
You can always use a computer. It depends what software you want to use for tracking and astrophotography.
Yep.
There are various ways of going here, and you can do it on the cheap, or you can do it very expensive.
So you get a Newtonian reflector, like a Celestron one, similar to the one the club one that we saw earlier.
You can get the Skywatcher f4 Newtonian reflector. which is about $900, I think.
Okay.
And I know someone who has got one. They're really happy with it. You may have to invest in a field flattener, because they do have a bit of coma. It's not visible if you're just visually observing, but if for astrophotography, because you're dealing with much wider field of view, you will see coma, so you'll need a coma corrector.
And the next question I've got as well is, it's also really hard to understand what quality photos you can take from Sydney. I mean, I was even imagining maybe I actually need to drive to the Blue Mountains. I just don't know. Like, it'd be really great to see.
You don't. I used to live in Boston, and I used to take quite good photos, and that's right next to the city.
Yep.
So it depends on what object you're actually photographing. If you're photographing galaxies, for example, they need extremely long exposures. They're very dim objects because their light is spread across large area. For clusters, globular clusters, they're very easy to photograph. They only take a few seconds to photograph. Some of the bright nebulae, like Orion, like what's the other one?
Eta Carina.
Eta Carina. They are also easy targets, very easy to photograph. There are some dim nebulae like Rho Fuci, for example. They need hours, like the Hand of God, for example. They need about 15, 20 hours. And
when you say 15, 20 hours as well, are you saying that because my assumption there would be you'd need a dedicated astrophotography camera for that and not a DSLR, as it would overheat? Or are you talking about taking multiple photos and then stacking across?
You take multiple photos and you stack them. With SLRs, I wouldn't exceed more than a couple of minutes, because you start getting amp glow.
Yep.
Dedicated cameras. There are CMOS dedicated cameras. With them, I wouldn't exceed 2 to 3 minutes either.
Okay.
They'll give you amp glow as well, and also sky glow, because especially in Sydney, they're going to start picking up noise and so on.
I'll show you. This is an image that this was taken from our site in Terry Hills.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right. So it's a combination of color and technique that lets you do that. So this is a reasonably wide field. So an ED80 would probably have this sort of a wide field, and so it's quite wide, and so you get a fair bit of light. But so you can take quite good photos from within Sydney.
David, do you have access to the Facebook page for NSAS?
Yeah, I'll bring it up now.
I have seen some of the photos on the NSAS site as well.
If you can bring up my Lagoon Nebula, which is the one I just posted recently. That's a 7-hour exposure, and just to give you an idea of what you can achieve. And I do this from Newport here. And
then I'm assuming you're using Stacker and then post-production Adobe PS.
That's correct. I use software called PixInsight, and at the end, I finishing touches are done in Photoshop. Yeah.
I'm going to be asking for some tutoring.
But there are so many. There are techniques that I use, to enhance the object and minimize noise and all sorts of things like that, by masking and doing double masking and sometimes even triple masking. Just to pull out those photons.
I might send an email through with my 1 million question sheet, but I do have another key one which I posted. So that's fantastic. It's amazing.
Yeah, so that's Igor's photo.
That's my Lagoon Nebula, which I've done recently.
It's beautiful. Good work. Very impressive. Yeah, the next question will probably be, you know, COVID noted aside, what other websites? I know you sort of saw my post in there, Ice in Space I finally came across, but whether it's even worth even considering secondhand gear for some of this stuff or just go new, or I guess it's probably a point of get what you can get at the moment.
Well, secondhand, if you know what you're doing, secondhand is pretty good. If you can identify what is, if you're doing astrophotography, you can do with a doublet, but then you'd probably want a William Optics doublet or something like that. I do recommend a triplet. This particular telescope here is a quadruplet. There are 4 lenses in it. This is an astrograph specifically designed for astrophotography. All of my telescopes are, and I have 4. I got the Sharpstar 100, Esprit 80, Esprit 150, and I have an RC 10-inch, which I use for galaxies and so on. And I did a galaxy recently. I sent it to David not long ago, and I guess I'll post it. If you go to our Facebook page, they post some photographs there. So.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
David, I'm afraid I've got to bail. I've got an early start tomorrow morning.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
Okay, good night, guys.
Good night, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Good night, and thank you.
All right, we might just I guess just do some final rounds of questions. Does anyone? So Phil, you can disappear if you.
I'll go. See ya.
All right, see you, mate.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I've got an 18-inch reflector. Not that I get dew very often. Maybe once a year. I had some dew last week. Can you get a dew heater for the 8-inch reflectors? Most of them are.
Of course you can.
Like they're made for refractors.
You can get a dew heater for any size telescope.
Yeah, I mean, as Igor showed you, it's just a piece of plastic with some his and hers or whatever you want to call it, Velcro around the outside. So you just tighten it up.
This is a dew heater here. There, and this is for this one here fits my 100mm and an 80mm.
Mine is 200mm. Like I couldn't find anything larger than 150.
No, they're heaps. I got.
Bintel have them in large sizes.
You can have them. You can have them for half a meter telescopes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you can get them, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It only happened once this year, once last year, like in the winter. But refractors don't usually. Reflectors don't usually get dew.
Well, it depends on the reflector. If it's a Schmidt-Cassegrain, it'll definitely get dew.
Newtonian.
If it's a Newtonian, well, you can get dew on the secondary.
Primary sometime, yeah.
But you can get heaters for the secondary. They actually mount on the back of the secondary.
Oh, okay.
And you don't actually need the dew heater strip. What you can do is you can put a heater on the back of the secondary mirror, and you'll never get dew. You can actually buy those for that particular telescope.
All right.
Well, the other alternative is you can use a fan. You can put a fan at the back of your primary, and it draws.
A fan for the summer, yeah. I can understand that. It just happened once last week. That was it. And once last year, yeah.
Yeah, but it's very rare to get Jew on that type of Newtonian reflector. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we might start to wrap it up. So Paul, I noticed you had a couple of questions which I think you sort of posted and got most of them answered through. The question of which of those three options to go for is always going to be like it's to some degree it comes down to personal choice. I certainly started out with a reflector, a Sept Cassegrain 8-inch on an equivalent to an HEQ5. It's a great little unit to start with. An ED80 is a great little tube. The club's got one. You saw Eagle's got one. They're good as well. I probably wouldn't go with a Prima Luci Eagle because I think that's just more expensive than probably what's needed. Just got a Canon, and as I said before, that sort of little control unit.
Got one.
You got one already? Yeah. You know, that's a great way to start out with that. And I'd just be using a laptop and using PhD 2. I don't know if you've heard of that software. So
PhD 2.
The reason why I'm using, let me explain the reason why I'm using Prima Luci Eagle. For one, it only draws 600 milliamps of current. If you compare that to my Apple that I was using prior, or my PC, they both draw about 6 to 7 amps. There's a significant difference in power consumption.
Yeah, and I think to be honest with you, I don't have a PC to take. I've only got a work PC and a home one that my wife uses. So it was more of a point of having to go and buy one. And then if I, you know what I mean, rather than buying one, would it make more sense to get something like that?
Yeah, I mean,
if you're going to continue astrophotography, you know, from this time on, and if that is what your interest is, then it would be a good choice. But there are other choices out there. You know, Prima Luci is not the only choice for it. Mm-hmm. So I would investigate other solutions as well.
Great, thanks.
Because you got the ASI Air Pro. I mean, I don't have one. I don't have either of those.
I've got a ASI Air Pro, and apparently there's a new one out with an Air Pro Plus, which apparently does a lot more than what I can actually do with my one. But that's a cheap way of doing it too, because it does much the same, except it's using Linux as opposed to Windows.
Yeah.
What I like about Prima Luci is that I can be 100 meters away from my telescope and still have a fairly good signal and be able to control it. So, you know, I can have my telescope outside here because I use my neighbor's backyard. I don't have a clear sky at all. And I run the telescope in my neighbor's backyard from my study. And you know, that's one of the reasons why I did select Prima Luci.
Okay, we might wrap up. So I hope everyone's got a lot of value from tonight.
Yeah.
It was a good conversation.
Yep.
Everyone seemed to be quite engaged. No one fell asleep. You know, normally lose a couple of people along the way sometimes.
I'd just like to add, David, if anyone's got any questions, you can always email me, or you can give me a call. You know, I think people have access to my mobile phone number and my email. Is that right, David?
We generally don't tend to send out people's email addresses, but if you send it to NSAS, so just go to the contact form, then we pass it through to Eagle. And once you two are set up and you're talking to each other, then we're happy to do so. But we don't send them out to everyone, just for security's sake.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
All right.
Yeah.
I hope everyone enjoyed, and I hope we were informative enough for you.
Hugely informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor.
The good side of it is that it was pretty basic to what we need to know. When it's not rocket science we're dealing with at the moment.
Yet.
We are dealing with the ground level as opposed to Igor's level.
Igor's level, yes.
But we understand where Igor is coming from, and we understand the other telescopes that are involved.
Yep.
But I think for a basic understanding of what a beginner is, this is where we are, looking at you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, good. All right,
And
everyone. Thanks
We
very much.
were all beginners once.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
right.
yes, but my life cycle is coming to an end, so I don't know whether I can outlast you.
Well, I'm not trailing too far behind you.
But
So we'll send you a link to the Zoom video. So there'll be part A and part B because we had to stop halfway through the video.
Yep.
But you'll get that. And if you want to look through it again, obviously you feel free. So
Yep.
good to see you all, everyone. Hope you
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Have a
See
lovely
you
night.
next time.
Thanks very
Bye-bye.
much.
Hey, everyone.
Everybody.